Hello, dear listeners. Today, we share an interesting story with you. Don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy listening. When I got home, my wife wasn't there yet. I looked at my watch. It was almost 10 p.m. I wondered where Natasha was lately. She had been coming home late. Sometimes she stayed at a friend's house, other times at work. I didn't pay much attention to her. You never know what can happen, but today, for some reason, I thought about it. Maybe because there was no food in the fridge. A cup stopped cooking a couple of months ago, but I always found something to eat. I sat by the open window and looked at the starry sky. A car roared under the window. The door slammed shut. My wife arrived. It was very late tonight. And as expected, a few minutes later, the click of the front door lock sounded, and silence. Normally, Natasha would announce her arrival by shouting. But today, silence. My wife entered the kitchen without taking off her shoes. Hello. There is nothing to eat at home. How about we have dinner at a cafe? I said in a calm tone. I didn't want to blame Natasha for not cooking dinner. Let's celebrate a little. I approached my wife and hugged her around the waist. It's been so long since we went on vacation together. I tried to kiss her, but she pulled away. We need to talk. Her tone didn't bode well. Something like a presentiment happened of some problem to one. Of course, my heart started beating fast. There's some problem at work. My wife sat on a stool. I'm leaving. I beg you to do it without scandals or arguments. I've fallen in love with someone else, and I want to be with him. He's been a good husband and father all this time. It's not about you. A man has to be happy. Natasha looked at me with guilt. I'm sorry, but I can't go on like this anymore. From the surprise, I was speechless for a moment. My heart sank into my stomach, struggling to keep a constant rhythm, and the children, Natasha. I stammered in a voice that wasn't the mine. What children? She said suddenly and angrily. The children are grown up now. I will explain everything to them myself. Later they will understand me. I have been a housewife, the flag, and a nanny for almost 40 years for all of them and for you. First of all, I have stopped being a woman. I have forgotten that I can also be loved, and I want to love and be loved. Natasha, you have never had enough love, I said quietly. I met a man, and I fell in love with him. I am going to go with him. Now Natasha stood up. Wait. I looked at my wife. How long have you been dating? It's been 6 months now. But it can't go on like this. I'm tired of lying to you. So, I finally made a decision. It will be better. More honest, at least. Natasha took a pack out of her bag and took out a cigarette. Thin, that was news. My wife smoked. And who is your new man? I tried to keep my emotions under control. He is a very talented artist. Natasha lit her lighter and looked at me. He is not like you. She did not finish the sentence, but her eloquent look told me a lot. It was strange. She always cared little about what I did. She considered my writing to be child's play. What counts is what makes money. It was a proposition to which many, if not all, women would have subscribed. I found myself thinking nonsense. My wife, with whom I have 2 children, and with whom I have lived for almost 40 years, is leaving me, and I'm talking about, yes, I have talent. It's ridiculous. And also, she continues, a cup. I want to keep this apartment and half the money in our joint account. I need something to live on and support a young lover. I thought, and out loud, I said, and the fact that my parents left me the apartment, it's fine, but you still have a house in the country. I made a gesture with my hand. I did not have the strength to deal with the division of property, Natasha. You are an adult, and you have made a decision. But I want you to know, I love you very much. But if you leave, there is no turning back. The spasms tightened my throat. I held on with all my strength so as not to burst into tears. Don't flatter yourself, that will never happen, she said coldly and arrogantly. She grabbed her bag and walked out of the kitchen. The front door slammed shut. I looked out the window and saw her get into the car. There was a silhouette of someone in the passenger seat. Natasha leaned towards him, and it was clear to me that they were kissing. It seemed to me that Natasha knew very well that I could see them, and she did it on purpose, so that it would hurt me even more. After a few minutes later, the car drove off. I got married quite young at 20 in my 4th year of university. Natasha was a year younger than me, our first year together. We had a son. 9 years later, a daughter straight after university. I joined the army as an officer. They paid good money there. So Natasha didn't work. She spent all her time with her son and daughter. My service was going well, and I continued to serve in the army. I graduated from the academy, and there were excellent career prospects before me. But those were difficult times. They started sending me on long business trips to conflict zones. On one of those trips, I received a serious head injury. I was hospitalized for 4 months until I was finally sent to the medical commission to decide my fitness for further service. The commission came to a sad conclusion. I was not fit for further service. They gave me a certificate of pension and a wound pension for all the good I had done the command. Shook my hand, wished me luck, and she forgot about me for sure. All that time in the rate she was there for me in everything she could. And I really saw that she loved me. She really loved me. She loved me. When I woke up in my room at night, I saw her tired from the day, curled up on the couch, sleeping next to my bed. And now, Natasha. What have you done after leaving the army? I got my first job in a big metallurgical factory. 7 years later, was also chief engineer. So there were no problems with money. And now I didn't know, at 55 years old, I retired out of boredom. Suddenly I started writing stories, but I never published them. Probably all this would have continued like this, until a magazine published my story. After a while I got a call from the Capitol, and they offered me to write a script based on this story. A year later, a movie was released. A movie, in the credits, was my name. Soon my first collection of stories came out. Then another one came out. Finally, a solid publishing house signed a contract with me, and I started receiving substantial royalties for something that no one wanted to read before all that time. I had no reason to reproach Natasha anything. At least, I never thought she was not faithful to me. The children have long since grown up. Both had families of their own, and now we had grandchildren. We lived well. At least, that is what I thought. Throughout our marriage, I never raised my voice against her. I never denied her anything. I enjoyed giving her things. I had a dream of driving, and I bought her a car with my first fee. I loved her very much. We also had no intimacy problems. I bought an old log house outside the city near the forest on the shores of the lake, and I intended to live in it the rest of my days with the woman I loved. They say that women live by emotion, not by reason. When she says she loves you, don't doubt it. It's true, she really loves you at that moment, but that doesn't mean at all that she loves you tomorrow. There are no women who love you. It's someone else's turn. Only naive idiots like me don't understand the relationship between a man and a woman is finite. It seems that my time, it's over. It's the other's turn. The logic of women is a strange thing. I think they themselves sometimes are not able to understand it completely. I looked for a long time at the dark square of the window as if I wanted to see there. My future destiny, what had to do with my wife outside my soul, was empty. I only had half left. How do you have to fall in love to leave your husband with whom you have lived for 40 years, when you were sincere, Natasha? Then when you took care of me, or now when without mercy, without hesitation, you left me for another in the morning. I gathered my things and called Natasha. I held the phone for a long time until I heard her unenthusiastic voice. I have vacated the apartment. How do I hand over the keys? I wanted to end the conversation quickly. For some reason, I did not feel comfortable talking to her. As soon as she exclaimed, "Put them in the mailbox. You did not have to leave so quickly. You could know I did not hear the rest," and hung up. That considerate for me. It is already past. My ex-wife never admits, not even for herself, to have been unfaithful and ruthless. Was there ever love, judging by her affairs? She never respected me for 6 months. She was cheating on me with another man, betraying me every day. Natasha was always only interested in one person, herself, and as a consequence, her comfortable existence. While these interests coincided with her family, we were together when a better option appeared. That was all goodbye, family. So after 40 years of married life, I was left alone. There were children and grandchildren, but that was not the same. There was not a single person who had been by my side all my life. I could pretend to be a cheerful man who didn't care about anything, but you can't fool. Your heart was lonely. We lived together with the rate for so long that I no longer remember being single. It seemed to me that she had always been, and would always be, where I was wrong. How could I lose the person I loved tormented by these thoughts? However, I realized that everything was predetermined, and I was powerless to do something that was... This was love. I don't believe it. Natasha simply confused her sudden passion with real feelings, and she made her choice, unfortunately, not in my favor. After years of living together, I had forgotten that I was a weak, deceitful, fragile, treacherous woman, always ready for betrayal and destruction of the family, for deceit. Cunning schemer using her charms to achieve personal goals. Maybe other women just don't exist in nature. And here is the result in your future happy life. There was no place for me. But the heart cannot be commanded. Despite everything, I still loved her. And so I knew we would never be together again. Our divorce was quick and smooth. We had no property claims between us. The children are adults, so no unnecessary talks. We stamped our passports with the dissolution of marriage stamp and were given the corresponding certificates. That was it. We are no longer husband and wife, strangers. Strangers to each other. Their fate was no longer my concern. I had a lot of urgent work to attend to the publishing house. I was preparing my new book for publication, and they sent me the layout to edit it. The film studio called me for the script of my story. Everyone wanted everything at once. Plus, the editor of the magazine I had sent the story to almost 2 years earlier came to see me with a... They kept silent all this time and finally decided to publish it. But it turned out the story had already been published by another publication. Then they got to the point of threatening me with a lawsuit, but I did not sign any contract with them. So with a clear conscience, I sent them to a place that is often written on the wall. All this time, I lived in a hotel wanting to get out of the depressing city as soon as possible, where everything reminded me of the past life. I didn't know where the rate was and what I was doing. All this time I heard vague rumors that not everything was going well in her new family life. What do you want? A young lover requires special treatment. And as I understood, the main element in the relationship of a young woman of 60 years and a promising artist of 40 years was money and real estate, and the money and real estate of my ex-wife. Everything she took with her after the divorce, her earthly passion, would last forever, until her money ran out. What they call artists, I knew very well. The only bad thing is that Natasha, because of the butterflies that flew before my eyes, did not see it. Or maybe she did not want to see it. I once saw her with a suitor in a supermarket. A middle-aged man with a grumpy and discontented expression on his face expressed his contempt for the world that surrounded him. It seemed doing people a favor by breathing the same air as them. At a certain moment they started kissing, and I got the impression that only one girl kissed her partner. Let her kiss him, but he in love didn't notice anything around him, to be honest. I felt sorry for her. She was actually a good woman chasing a phantom love. But sooner or later the crush goes away, and not everyone can handle the hangover that follows. All our mutual friends were in shock several times. They tried to call me for a sincere conversation, but I cleverly avoided those introspective conversations with plausible pretexts. The children were indifferent to the breakup of the parents. My son came to see me. Shortly after our divorce, we talked at length about trivial things, but he never dared to ask me about his relationship with his mother. I knew that they communicated with Natasha. They did not limit her contact with her grandchildren, but they strictly forbade her to bring her new husband. At these meetings in early October, I went for 2 weeks to shoot a television series based on my story. This was my first time attending such an event. Everything was new to me. Living for 2 weeks surrounded by actors whose faces I had only seen on screen before was at the same level as them, participating in rehearsals and even giving some advice on the set. Time passed by unnoticed. After returning from filming, my lawyer called me and asked me to come see him. I mentioned my busy schedule, but he insisted. Yuri, your ex-wife put the apartment up for sale. The lawyer looked at me carefully, playing with his glasses with his fingers. Your apartment and where you are going to live, she did not understand in the study of her lover. I do not know that. What I know is that her lover owes a very important sum to serious people, and your ex-wife is trying to cover the debt by selling her house if love blinds. I wonder if they have already spent the money. Probably yes. If they are talking about selling the apartment, perhaps a fee does not see who she is getting involved with. I thanked the lawyer for the information and explained to him that now This matter did not concern me after having a cup of coffee. I said goodbye 2 days after my meeting with the lawyer. I heard the news that the apartment had been sold, and I was losing sight of Natasha again. There were more and more cases and papers piling up, and at one point I realized that without an assistant, I could not deal with this avalanche. But where to find a suitable candidate, I did not think much, and placed an advertisement in a newspaper. Advertising only with a contact phone number of several candidates, I decided on a young woman who graduated from the Faculty of Philology, had an excellent knowledge of several foreign languages, and most importantly, of computers. Jim typed professionally, moving his fingers quickly on the keyboard in such a way that my eyes got tired of watching the process. She edited the texts of my works, responded quickly to emails and inquiries, kept a record of the events I was supposed to attend. I rented an office and forwarded all the finished material to her email. I gave up on my personal life. That's all, nothing more. Women I only work, especially in my old age. It didn't leave me any chance to succeed with women. But over time, I began to notice that Jin's attitude towards me had changed. It seemed that she was seriously interested in me. More and more often she appeared in the hotel room where I worked in the mornings. She would stop by on purpose to check some minor details, and at the same time he offered me natural coffee and homemade pastries. He didn't rush me. He didn't impose his company on me. He didn't bore me with his chatter. But I felt that I was sinking deeper and deeper into the hodgepodge of home comfort created by Jim. I arrived quite late to the room that autumn night after long negotiations at the publishing house, and after a tedious formal dinner in a restaurant, fatigue enveloped my shoulders. All I wanted to do was get to my room, fall into bed, and sleep. I went up my floor and was surprised to discover that my room was open. The only other person who had a key was my assistant. Maybe something bad was happening to him. And he came to see me at such a late hour. I cautiously entered the room. I took off my shoes and went to my desk behind me. The door creaked when it opened. Jean came out of the bedroom. Something is wrong. She shook her head behind her on the nightstand. I saw an open bottle of champagne, fruits, and sandwiches. What is the party for? Silently drank Jin my hand and led me towards the bedroom door. In surprise, I lost the ability to resist. And it happened in Jean's arms, submissive, and at the same time authoritarian. Suddenly I realized what they call true love. The fusion of souls and hearts beating in unison. Not only the closeness of bodies and the entanglement of feet, and I also realized that after a rate, I could hardly love someone else. The phone rang and pulled me out of the sticky embrace of sleep. I stayed awake for a while and the phone kept ringing. I searched with my hand on the nightstand and finally pressed the green button. Hello? Who is it? Hello. There is a call for you from the emergency room of the hospital in the city an hour ago. Your wife was admitted in a very serious condition. Can you come? Now, my wife, I didn't realize it was Natasha, but she and I are divorced. I don't know. But your number is on her phone, as is her husband. Your wife is in the operating room on the 2nd floor. So you'll be here. Yes, I'm on my way. I almost ran to the 2nd floor, doctor. What happened to you? They beat you badly with a broken arm, the collarbone, and some ribs. Yes, and she was raped. I'll be more specific later. The doctor looked at me suspiciously. You two live together. She left me in the summer, and now she lives with another man. I think I understood why the doctor looked at me suspiciously. You think I hit her and I raped. It's not my place to make assumptions. Let the police sort it out. The doctor took off his glasses and wiped them on the hem of his lab coat. They picked her up in an ambulance called by the neighbors. She was almost naked and covered in blood. The police will come to take care of her, doctor. Is she conscious? Can I talk to her? Her mouth was dry with emotion. She is unconscious, but she keeps asking about a certain your. There is another question. The doctor took his glasses off again. She needs an operation. A broken rib. He has punctured a lung. It's a complicated operation, and the doctor hesitated for a second. It costs money anyway. We have free medical care. It's true, but you know what I mean. Medicines, there is a difference between the economic and non-economic version. Rehabilitation. Again. How much was he tired of hearing the doctor's verb? Rio. The doctor took a notebook out of his pocket and wrote a 5-digit number. This is in dollars, he explained. Operate the money will be there by noon, today. The doctor nodded his head. I dialed my son's number and told him briefly everything without shocking details. I asked him to call his sister and come to the hospital. The police arrived. They tortured me for a long time, but in the end, they left me alone, convinced that I had a solid alibi. The hotel receptionist confirmed that I had been in my room all night and that I only left after the hospital call. I looked at my watch. It was 7:30 in the morning. There was not much time left. I thought for a while and dialed my editor's number. Good morning, I'm Yuri. Tell me, if I can get an advance for a book that I haven't written yet, I have problems with Yuri. The editor interrupted me. How much do you need? I told him. Well, it's almost half of your rate. I think we can solve that problem. Come to the editor's office at 8 o'clock. I felt a little better. I returned to the hotel at 8:30. I changed clothes quickly. I called Jean and canceled all my commitments for the day. It seemed to me I was not surprised at the editor's office. Everything was resolved quickly. The lawyers drew up a contract and transferred the money to me. I immediately called the hospital, and 5 minutes later I deposited the required amount into their account. Refusing the coffee they offered me, I went to see Natasha. Well, what can I say? The operation was quite successful. I think soon your wife will recover. The doctor looked at me intensely again. She told the police. She fell down the stairs. Can I go see her? Yes, but not for long. She is still very weak from the anesthesia. Natasha was lying covered with a sheet tangled in tubes and wires. When I walked in, she looked at me, and tears filled her eyes. Moved her lips, trying to tell me something. I caressed her hand. Don't worry. Everything will be okay. Natasha tried to smile with the corners of her lips cracked. I practically settled in the hospital. They put a sofa in her room, and I spent all my time with the cup. I washed it with a sponge. I changed it her underwear and spoon-fed her. Her whole body was a big bruise on her breasts. I saw strange burns. It looked like someone had burned her with cigarettes. All this time we barely talked. She tried to make conversation, but I avoided it under any pretext. I had nothing to talk to her at the time. We no longer knew. Everything said the children helped. My daughter came very often to replace me and give me some time to rest. My son also did not forget his mother. I even started to think that we were a family again like before. But it just seemed you can't bathe twice in the same river. After about a month and a half, Natasha started to walk a little at first. She started walking down the hospital corridor, and then started going out to the park, and 2 weeks later, Natasha was discharged from the hospital. She no longer needed my help. Before leaving, I handed Natasha a blue folder with the documents of her apartment and the keys. She did not understand. I immediately noticed what was happening and looked at me, surprised. I managed to buy your apartment and put it in your name. She tried to tell me something, but instead of words, she burst into tears without saying another word. I turned around and left. I had to make an effort not to turn around. A man will never forgive the betrayal of the woman he loves. Betrayal has no statute of limitations, and I loved her too much. As to forgive, all this time I was tormented by a question: what really happened? Natasha flatly refused to tell me. So I decided to find out. I myself sat in her yard, talked to the neighbors, and collected a picture of what had happened after a month of living together. Natasha and her promising artist realized that this alliance was not going to end well. While there was money, they still got along, but then the fights and scandals began one day. Natasha surprised her lover in the company of 2 drunk friends when she tried to kick them out of the house. Her new husband explained her place, accompanying the explanatory conversation with his fists, and then they raped her one by one and all together. They mocked her for a long time, putting out lit cigarettes on her breasts. To prevent the victim from escaping, they tied Natasha to a chair. But when they fell unconscious for drunkenness, she managed to untangle the ropes and leave the apartment. What happened afterwards? I already knew. It makes sense to me because her new husband never went to see Natasha. Winter was approaching, inevitably. The last leaves fell. Some fell almost vertically to the ground, while others were picked up by the wind and spun as in a farewell dance. And sometimes it seemed to me that my destiny revolved in this autumn tango life. sometimes brings strange surprises, as I discovered one of the bastards who raped Natasha soon committed suicide by throwing himself from the window of his own kitchen. The police, as always, could not determine the reason for that desperate act. The other rapist was found hanged the next morning. Everything was clear. He had drunk a lot the night before with his friends, and that was all hangover syndrome. It was already late at night when I parked the car a block away from the house where the talented artist's studio was located. I put on the gloves and pulled the hood of my jacket over my head and headed for the entrance. An ordinary combination lock with a standard set of numbers. I went up to the right floor and took my time. There were 2 apartments on the floor. I put some chewing gum in the peephole of my neighbor's door and took out a bunch of lockpicks. Finding the right key was a matter of a minute. I lightly tapped the lock with the lockpicks. The lock clicked silently, and the door swung open. A standard apartment, 2 adjoining rooms, and a kitchen. I quietly made my way to the room where the great painter slept on a couch squashed between easels and unfinished paintings. I could smell the smell of alcohol in the air. Stale bohemianism, I thought to myself. Natasha, didn't you see who you were leaving? My God, women are so blinded by passion. I leaned over and shook the artist by the shoulder. When he started to show signs of life, I tapped him on the temple and I knocked him out. When he woke up, he was surprised to find himself tied to a chair. Surprise, you should have seen his eyes. Everything was there, but above all, there was fear. Animal, be careful after all. I'm not an animal. I ripped the tape off his mouth and removed his hood. I wanted to hear your voice. Do you recognize me? I spoke softly, but very convincingly. No, it wasn't my intention. Forgive me too. He broke down almost into a whisper, realizing that screaming was useless. There was a peculiar smell. It seemed like he was scared, poor thing guy. But this is also a sign for me. It's time to end this. I covered his mouth again and slowly took my silenced pistol out of my pocket after having removed the safety. The cartridge was already in the chamber, and I didn't have to operate the bolt. Then I put it in a plastic bag so I wouldn't have to look for the shell later, and with a practical movement, I pointed it at the artist's head. I pulled the trigger lightly. The gun jumped slightly up, and the bullet hit the right spot. I changed clothes in the car. I put my clothes, gun, and gloves in the bag. As I drove down the Paseo, I stopped and got out. The moon was shining on the river. A silver path of moonlight stretched over the water almost to the shore. I threw a bag into the water they asked for. 3 years later, my car was racing along the highway, scattering the light snow that had fallen during the night, leaving behind a quick, ephemeral trail. 5 kilometers away, the asphalt turned to dirt. Overnight, a little frost had settled, and the wheels crunched through the thin ice that covered the puddles that glistened under the tonneau. It's only autumnal. The further I went, the narrower the road became. I slowed down and soon found myself surrounded by a dense forest. So after about 8 kilometers more, I would be at my destination. The midday sun looked blurred, and I found the surrounding landscape particularly sharp. The leaves on the trees had almost disappeared, and those that remained stood out as bright red and yellow spots on the gray-green wall of the autumnal forest. As I turned the next bend, a large lake opened up. The road ran almost next to the shore, and I could clearly see foaming waves like little lambs strolling on the wide surface of the water. I lowered my head window. A light breeze from the lake brought with it the smell of seaweed and humidity. The road turned sharply to the left, and a large one-story house built with pine logs appeared. I parked the car near the boathouse, a sturdy Indian-style structure with wooden ornaments and elk antlers blackened by time on the gable. I took a large bag from the trunk and went to the porch. A young woman came out to greet me, holding the hand of a little boy. "Hi, is everything okay, Jim?" She kissed me, looking into my eyes. "We were waiting for you." The boy hugged my leg, "Dad, and well, you bought him." I took him in my arms. "I bought him, darling. He is in the car." I hugged him. "Let's go. Look for him together." The sun was shining brightly. The sky was almost clear, and its dazzling blue hurt the eyes. A cool breeze from the lake played with the tops of the tall pines, raising white and bright clouds. Thanks for listening. The story to the end. Support us with your subscription, and like we strive for you.